You are listening to Prophet Pearls with Nehemia Gordon and Keith Johnson, exploring biblical prophecy for yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Prophet Pearls, meet the prophets. They're people right out of history. Nehemia and Keith, they're looking for the pearls and the prophets. Someday, maybe Keith will win the fight, and Nehemia will see the light. Prophet Pearls, have a Yehovah time, have a Prophet Pearls time. Wilma!
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was the introduction from the one and only Nehemia Gordon, who's come up with an original introduction to Prophet Pearls. Okay, here we go.
Look, to admit to the people that this was your idea, Keith.
No. Well, listen, you come up with something original. We're going to be in the land of Israel here in the next couple weeks. After that, we'll get back to our good old-fashioned introductions. But in the meantime, we've had to pull some things at different places. And you've come up with the last few introductions, which I think you went from Star Wars to
Star Trek.
To Star Trek.
Oh, I should do Star Wars. That's a great
I can't
idea.
Wait till next week. I literally can't wait till next week. Nehemia, what are you going to
You'll see.
come up with next week? Just do me a favor, whatever you come up with, make sure you listen to the theme music. So what the others?
It won't help.
Where are you and where am I? I'm upside down in the earth. This is our third attempt at recording. Why are we on our third attempt? Because we are in a bit of a struggle, and let's just say we're in a sensitive situation. I'm in a sensitive situation where we sometimes things don't get. We're not able to say everything we want to say, and of course, where are you, Nehemia? I just want to.
I am the wandering Jew in San Antonio, Texas.
But you were living in San Antonio. What do you?
Well,
where are you?
I'm in a hotel.
Something happened. What happened?
So some really wonderful people were hosting me, and I was out in Washington and found out when I was over in Washington that there were some issues in the house where I was staying, and now it's under repairs. And so I came back, and there was no room in the inn for me to lay my head, and so I had to go to the Best Western.
Okay, so you're at the Best Western. You broke something at the house?
No, I didn't break anything. I wasn't even in the state.
I've been with you several times in houses, I'm telling you. Just kidding. Well, listen, and I have just returned. Hopefully, if you're listening to this right now, I am back safe in the most populous city in the world, where some doors are flinging open. I cannot wait to get with you face to face, Nehemia, in the land of Israel, where I can tell you, where we can talk about it based on your experiences and mine. I'm really looking forward to this, but folks, we should know we're actually recording this week and next week ahead of time, with the hopes that we will then meet face to face at Bubby Dina's. That's right, folks. We're going to be bringing the Prophet Pearls, recording it from the land of the prophets in a place that I cannot wait to get to.
Live from Jerusalem, Israel.
We're live from Jerusalem, Israel. I think we're going to take a motorcycle over there. And once we get there, we're going to attempt to record as many as possible face-to-face, because our travel schedules and the logistics and the technology have just been horrendous. We've got a few places that we're going to be, even in the next few weeks, in the next few months, where we're not sure who's going to be where, and it's just real difficult to do it. So the door has been opened. We're going to be in the land of the prophets, and we're going to do we're going to need your help. Can I say this right now, Nehemia?
Yeah.
We're going to need people's help, because when we're doing this, we're obviously going to be doing all of them. Now, we're going to be prepared because we've reading and studying and preparing. But I'm going to ask people even more during the next couple of weeks, when we are recording them in March, that people would really do some work with us ahead of time. That they would begin to look into the sections that we're going to be recording, and to fill in the gaps where we may have missed it. Bring in some perspective. Comment on our pages, nehemiaswall.com, bfainternational.com, and give your comments about these Prophet Pearls. So this kind of changes the game. It's a little different than we had hoped, but I think it's kind of exciting. So let's see if we can record this week, Nehemia. We're actually in a great section in First Kings chapter 5, verses 26 through 1 Kings chapter 6. Verse 13, and our Prophet Pearl partners, who are the two servants of El Elyon, Yehovah El Elyon. They don't like to have their name, but they have been awesome. They've been supporting us. They've become Prophet Pearl partners for 4 or 5 of these sections. And so this one, I just want to say to them, they know who they are. Thank you so much for supporting us. As you can see, it is a challenge. Nehemia is presently in a hotel. I'm upside down in the earth, having just returned from Africa, and the beats just keep on coming. So thank you to our Prophet Pearl partners. Let's jump in, Nehemia.
Yeah.
1 Kings chapter 5.
Yeah, so
verse
we're
26.
here in the section which is the Prophet Pearl section that corresponds to the Torah portion of Terumah. It's the Torah portion is Exodus 25:1 through 27:19. The Prophet Pearls portion, the Prophet portion, is 1 Kings 5:26 through 6:13.
And what do you see to connect?
Yeah, it's pretty.
When you read that, what is it that is this one of those okey dokes? I mean, is this pretty clear?
Yeah, no, this is pretty clear. So in Exodus 25, we have the building of the tabernacle. In 1 Kings 5:26 through 6:13, we've got the building of the temple. It's pretty clear. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
And yeah.
All right. Now, I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Basically, if people look at 1 Kings 5:26,
all right,
where does it open up? Where does it open up for you?
1 Kings chapter 5. Well, let's see. Isn't it? Would you have different verse numbers in your English Bible?
All right. Well, see, 1 Kings here in 1 Kings it ends in
5:26 in the.
Yeah, it says.
Oh, I see. So you have different. You've got, wow, you're way off, you guys. So that's verse 12 in the English. Okay, I didn't know that. 1 Kings 5:12 in the English. Yeah.
It's 1 Kings 5:12 in the English.
Yeah.
So
you read the right section, right?
Yeah. No question about that. What I was going to say was interesting is that when it says 5:26 for us, and I'm just looking here, and I'm actually reading, folks, in my trusty NIV. Why do I like the NIV? Because it does great as far as modern language. It doesn't do so well as far as always matching with the original intent of Scripture, but I'm able to go back and forth. And so in terms of communication, I do love the way that the NIV uses the English language, which is, I could give you a story. I won't do that. But as I mentioned, when I open up the Hebrew Bible, obviously it's a little different. Now, Nehemia, real quick, when you see your Hebrew Bible, it says at 5:26. Now, do you happen to have the ability, I think you do with the computer, to see the difference between where the Hebrew Bible opens up for this section and where the English Bible opens? So just really clear, the English verse is?
1 Kings 5:12.
Which actually is interesting. In the NIV, the middle of a paragraph. So the section is opening up in the middle of a paragraph in my English Bible, but for you it starts out as.
Oh, it's the middle of a paragraph?
Yes.
Well, it starts off, and Jehovah gave wisdom to Solomon, to Shlomo, as he had spoken to him. And there was peace between Hiram and between Shlomo, and they made a covenant between them.
Okay, awesome.
That's what it starts out as, 1 Kings 5:26, which is 5:12 in the English.
5:12 in the English. So there's a lot of verses off here, folks. Just bear with us as we're going through here. King Solomon constructed.
Our verses are off. Our sound is off because you're in a
the time is off. I'm a day ahead of you. It's funny, when we were trying to organize this, and Nehemia said we'll be meeting on the 13th. So of course I was ready on the 13th, which happens to be yesterday, but it's now the 14th to me. And the time is off. You're on the. I don't know where.
Look,
you are.
I'm in America. In America, they only know their own time.
Okay, I got to tell you something about that. Every day when I'm up in the morning, I go downstairs. There's a calendar in front of me when I come out preparing to go outside into the rain or wherever, and the calendar does two things. It shows what time it is according to the Gregorian calendar, and then before it says this is what time it is according to the lunar calendar. So every single day in this part
lunar,
of China,
you mean the Jewish calendar?
The lunar, well, you can call it the Jewish calendar. I mean, I'm saying.
Well, but is the lunar calendar used by the Chinese? You mean? Not the
lunar
biblical
calendar used by the Chinese. Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so when you go out, you see both dates, and it's really interesting because every day I'm confronted with the fact that here they acknowledge both times, and boy, I wish I could. I won't bore you all with all of that, but there's some really exciting things about what I call the sights, the sounds, the smells of what I sometimes sense when I'm reading Scripture, or the things that I've learned about God's time over the last few years. And now to see how here, that in this culture, according to the lunar cycle, that over here they're like, well, they're counting the days based on Pope Gregory, and they're counting the days based on the cycle of the moon. And I just think, for me, when I see that, I'm like, wow, that's kind of interesting. But anyway, back to the issue of the dates and the times and how we're confused back and forth, and we got the verses back and forth.
So that's interesting that you mentioned that there's this dual. Like, did you do that on purpose? Because you want to talk about chapter 6, verse 1? Oh,
I'm trying to
hold
give
on
you
to that for
softballs.
until we get to
It's just not,
6-1.
you're not, it's really interesting.
But we're in 526, which you call 512.
Exactly.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Let's do it.
So he sent them off to Lebanon in shifts of 10,000 a month. Can we stop for a second? So Solomon, it says the conscripted. What does it say in the Hebrew Bible there?
Oh, so it says, and King Shlomo raised up a tax from all of Israel.
I love this.
And the tax was 30,000 people.
Okay.
30,000 men.
Now, Nehemia, when you read that, what do you think? Like no, seriously, when you hear those words, what comes to mind?
Well, so first of all, honestly, the first thing I thought of when I saw here tax and Solomon is what happens later on with the whole story of Rehoboam, his son, who has an encounter with Jeroboam or Yerovam, and what happens there is they come to Solomon's son and they say, "Look, the burden of your father was very heavy. Can you make the burden lighter?" And the elders say, "Yeah, if you serve them today, they'll serve you for the rest of your life." But his friends who are his age say, "Nah, you let them know that you're no wimp. That if your father Solomon beat them with whips, you're going to beat them with scorpions, and meaning the taxes are going to be much higher." And then I love what happens after that. So he sends his taxman, Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, sends his taxman. It's in 1 Kings 12:18 in the Hebrew. I don't know what verse that is in the English. 1 Kings 12:18. It's the same in the English. It says, "Then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was over the tribute." In Hebrew it says over the tax, the mas. "And all Israel stoned him with stones that he died. Therefore King Rehoboam made speed to get him up to his chariot to flee to Jerusalem." So he sends the taxman and they stone him, they kill him. And the king himself has to flee. And the seeds of that event that would lead to the split of the kingdom, this kingdom splitting in two, is in this verse that we just read, where Solomon says, "I've got to build a big temple, a beautiful temple for a great, wonderful God that requires taxes." And so that taxation was forced labor. And it's interesting. So let's ask the question, if this isn't too controversial. It's at first glance, it's like, wait, that's kind of barbaric. Their taxation was forced labor. Is our system any different?
Okay, folks, we're going to have that edited out. Let's move on. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, so in other words, let's make this. Let's put these in sort of practical terms. What I like about us reading the prophets and yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So for today, in terms of some parallel to what was happening then, what would be if you were saying what do you give it to me clear?
So if one way of looking at it is to say, okay, well, where is a person forced to work for the government? And the answer to that would be if you have to do community service, that could be a parallel. But I don't think that's a fair parallel, because that's a punishment, whereas community services. Whereas this was just like, for being a citizen, you have to pay you have to provide this service. And I do rethink the parallel. If somebody in the U.S., for example, pays, I don't know, let's just throw, or in many countries, you may pay a tax rate that's, let's say it's 25%, right? So that means, so the way we look at that is you're paying 1/4 of your money, but the way they're describing it here is basically 1 out of every 4 days you're working for the government. And that's what's being described here in the story of Solomon. It's 1 every 3. For a month they would work for the government, and they could go home for 2 months and work for themselves. Then they'd come back the 4th month and work for the government. 2 more months, 5 and 6, they're back at home. Month 7, they're working for the government. They're working for Solomon, and that's the cycle that's being described there.
Okay, so in a sense, when I go, when a person is going in and they look at their check, they could actually calculate and say, of the total amount that I made this month, this day was a day where I just specifically worked for the government, because they took
all day. I worked hard and I sweated, and I labored, and it was for the U.S. government.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly, or whatever country you're in.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to agree with you. I think that's really I think that's apropos for the situation.
Okay.
So that's what he taxed them. It says, and he sent them off to Lebanon in shifts of 10,000 a month, so that they spent 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Wow, boy, I could go further. Let me ask this, Nehemia. In Israel right now, with the military, and they have the volunteers that are, that serve at a certain time, and depending, let's just say it's not a time of specifically like the Gaza 50-day war, but on a normal basis where there's a guy who's working at a company, and he works at that company, but there's an understanding that at a certain time he's going to be a part of the reserve. Is that right?
So Israel has a system that some people would argue is based on this, but it's actually based on and it maybe is partly based on this, but it was based directly on the Swiss Army. Mm-hmm. Not the Swiss Army knife, but the Swiss military. They actually went to Switzerland and studied the system there, and they implemented an Israeli version of it, which is, the way it works today is, I'll take, for example, my nephew. So my nephew is, when he turned 18, he was drafted into the Israeli military, and he's now in an elite combat unit called Golani, and he's in that unit for 3 years. Now, at the end of 3 years, they might say, wow, you're the best soldier we've ever had. We want you to stay longer, and so he can volunteer to stay longer. Mm-hmm. And even if he doesn't end up staying longer, they have to invite him to do that. Even if he ends up, finishing after 3 years, which most people do, then they will call him once for, and it varies, and the system is changing all the time, but pretty much it's like, they'll call you for a month every year or every 2 years, depending on what how your unit is set up. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you could have my nephew who 5 years from now is working for a high tech company, mm-hmm. and he'll work for the high tech company 11 months out of the year, and that 12th month, whenever that happens to be, they'll say you've got to come and serve in your army unit, mm-hmm. and all the other people in his army unit will come and serve as well. So yeah, so it's partially based on this, you could say.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting that the society, the present day, I mean, just that picture, basically, yep, that's the way it is. And there are reserves also in the United States Army. I've met people who, at different times, they know it's a weekend, they go and they serve in the reserve. But this picture,
but the difference is in the U.S. military, you have a draft. Mm-hmm. You don't have a draft anymore, mm-hmm. and so you don't get into that reserve system in the first place unless you volunteer to be in it.
Right.
Whereas in the Israeli military, we have a people's army where everybody is. Not everybody, but most citizens are in the army or are supposed to be in the army, mm-hmm. Certainly when they're young. And so my nephew, for example, he may continue to do that until he's like maybe 40 or 45.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that something?
Imagine that.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it says here that Solomon had 70,000 carriers and 80,000 stonecutters in the hills, as well as 3,300 foremen who supervised the project and directed the workmen. I mean, he had a system.
Oh. Wait. We're just...
Go ahead.
So that word, So which? Wow. So I'll tell you what it says in Hebrew. That was verse 30, right, mm-hmm. or verse 16 in the English. Yep. It says, all right. Well, let's just read the end part. It says, "Harodim ba'am ha'osim ba'melacha," which yours translated, having charge of the people who did the work.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
directed the workmen? Yes.
Okay, and then in the JPS it says, who were in charge of the work and supervised the gangs doing the work. And what it says in Hebrew is Harodim Ba'am, who had dominion over the people. And that's the same word it uses in Genesis where it says, be fruitful and multiply and have dominion over the earth. Mm-hmm. It's a word of conquest, a word of subjugating something to serve your needs. Mm-hmm. And that it's really a word of subjugation. Mm-hmm. So really it's who subjugated the people or who dominated the people who did the work. Mm-hmm. This is not being described in positive terms. This is foreshadowing what's going to happen in 2 Kings, or later in 1 Kings 12, when they come to Rehoboam.
I like that word.
It's preparing us for that.
It's a foreshadow.
Yeah.
At the king's command, they removed from the quarry large blocks of quality stone to provide a foundation of dressed stone for the temple. Let me read this last verse here. The craftsmen of Solomon and Hiram and the men of, Gaval, cut and prepared the timber and stone for the building of the temple. And I have to say, you can read something like this, and you can read it, and you can move on, and you can kind of get an image, and you've seen pictures, and you've seen that sort of thing. But I have to tell you, Nehemia, this really does bring me back to the beginning of the time that you and I met. Now, someone asked me the question, my wife, Andrea, she said, how long have you and Nehemia known each other? How many years have you've been, walking along this path of the Bible and that? And I said, it's been, it has been 12 plus years. 2002 is when we met. Our first meeting was around the Torah scroll. Our second meeting was just outside the place where Yehovah placed his name forever. But we were waiting to go underneath the old city of Jerusalem down into the tunnels. And I have to tell you that image down there is plastered in my brain when I read something like this, and it talks about the stones and about the actual what it was that Solomon and I'm specifically speaking about what's there today. I'm not speaking about looking at the stone that Solomon moved, but just the way that the stones and how large the stones are, and the way that these stones are used and moved, and what they would have done. I mean, it still overwhelms me. The way that they did this. Now, you come from an archaeological background, so when you hear about this, what kind of comes to your mind about these stones and what it was that Solomon was doing?
Yeah, so one of the first things I think about these big cut stones is we go in the Israel Museum. They have this place where in the archaeology section where they have these giant black stones. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. They're giant black stones, and they have like a lion on the side, and they're made of what's called basalt, which is a volcanic rock, and that was used for these sort of decorations at the corners. Like that's probably what it's describing. These are the precious stones that were hewn stones. And the reason that basalt was used for that especially is that it was black and it stood out against the limestone, which was all the rest of the stones. But also it's like a very hard stone, so it's a great stone for a foundation, very strong stone. Great stone for a foundation, great for like corners. It's not going to crack or break. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to cut, but once you get that thing cut, that's beautiful. That's going to really hold your building, and that's what I think when I hear about these ashlars or hewn stones.
Really, wow. So so anyway, so we're dealing with these stones. We're dealing with what Solomon did, and again, you're going to have to really help me through this, because as we're reading, again, I have a hard time as far as the history, reading the Bible, understanding the history of what took place in the present day battle, because we talk about yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Well, today, the battle over where that temple was and all that. I said we're not going to get into all that, but let's just say this: there's the ability to cut these stones right from the place where the temple was built. In other words, there's stone there. I mean, there's quarries, there's that sort of thing, and I guess is what I was trying to get to. I thought you were going to put on your thing. It's like I got my archaeology degree from Hebrew University, and you're going to be talking about.
I do have my archaeology degree.
You do, absolutely, you do, and I'm very proud of that.
All right, and so I was giving the archaeologist answer, which is that it probably was one of these big black basalt stones. Mm-hmm. Which contrasted nicely with all the white limestone that would have been on top of it and around it. Mm-hmm. Like that would have been the great foundations there. Now that's obviously not what Herod did. 1,000 years later, what he did is he took limestone from actually the northern part of the Temple Mount and he slid it along the slope, and then he used that to build up the southern part, which was kind of a depression. And flattened it out. Is that what you were looking for?
That's what I was looking for. You're just not cooperating today. You're kind of like
giving you the archaeology answer, not the tourist answer.
You're kind of like this. You're like this technology. While we're doing this, you folks, I've switched between 3 different things on the fly. In fact, one of the deals, the battery was going down. The other one, this is really. So when I'm giving you these softballs, it's usually because I'm trying to figure out how to keep us going here. Oh. And in the old days, Nehemia, when we did the original the original Torah pearls, there'd be time where you talk for hours, like you would just go on and on and on, and I'd have to interrupt you. But now you're being so complimentary, and you're stopping, and you're not interrupting, and I'm just not used to this time.
Because you keep cutting out and I can't hear you. But, all right, I'm going to read you. I'm going to jump over to and here's homework for people, because we're not going to get to all of this.
No.
What the homework for people is they've got to go. You cannot read a section in Kings like this without looking at the parallel passage in Chronicles.
Yes,
you can't do it.
You just can't.
So they've got to go for homework and read 2 Chronicles chapters 2 and 3.
There it is.
We're not going to read all of them right now, and specifically what I want people to do is look at the numbers. We could probably spend a whole session, a whole program just talking about the numbers, how they compare between Chronicles and Kings. We don't have time for that. We're not going to do that. But I just want to read a little section of the interaction that went on between Solomon and Hiram of Tyre, which we don't hear about. We just hear they made a covenant or a treaty in your English, and they had this kind of interaction, and we don't really know much about it. But I love the details that we get in the Book of Chronicles. I'm going to read you from the JPS, chapter 2 Chronicles 2:2, and I'll try to go quickly. And
because the people are going to read it too. You told the people to read
it.
Too. Okay.
All right, but we're going to discuss part of this. Yes. Solomon sent this message to King Huram of Tyre. In view, and now it's in quotations, obviously, and the original is no quotation marks, but this is the letter. In view of what you did for my father David in sending him cedars to build a palace for his residence, see, I intend to build a house for the name of Yehovah my God. I will dedicate it to him for making incense offerings of sweet spices in his honor, for the regular rows of bread, and for the morning and evening burnt offerings on Sabbaths, new moons, and festivals, as is Israel's eternal duty. The house that I intend to build will be great, inasmuch as our God is greater than all gods. Now, can we be honest here? Solomon wasn't politically correct. I mean, could you imagine today this happening? Netanyahu sending a letter to Abu Mazen and saying,
how about
dear
the King of Jordan?
Let's
don't do Abu Mazen. Let's
or
go
the
to King
King, Your Majesty, King. I don't even know the name of the King of Jordan. King Abdallah. Our God is the greatest of all gods, Yehovah, the creator of the universe. He is the greatest of all gods. Could you imagine what the reaction would be of the King of Jordan? And the world would say, he's insulted them. He's but this is Solomon. The house that I intend to build will be great as much as our God is greater than all gods, who indeed is capable of building a house for him. Even the heavens to their uttermost reaches could not contain him, and who am I that I should build him a house, except as a place for making burnt offerings to him? That's a really interesting theological statement. In other words, God doesn't actually live in the house. This is just a place to bring sacrifices. That's fascinating. Now send me a craftsman to work in gold, silver, bronze, and iron, and in purple, etc. And so they end up sending him. He ends up getting his version of Bezalel. Remember in the Torah there was the guy Bezalel who was inspired to work in all this workmanship. And so they have this their own version of Bezalel, who Hiram of Tyre sends. So let's just skip ahead to verse 10. Huram, king of Tyre, sent Solomon this written message in reply. Because Yehovah loved his people, he made you king over them. Huram continued, Blessed is Yehovah, God of Israel, who made the heavens and the earth, who gave King David a wise son endowed with intelligence and understanding to build a house for Yehovah and a royal palace for himself, etc., etc. So isn't that amazing? So instead of what we would have today, whereas the UN would come and condemn King Solomon for insulting the God of the Jordanians, instead Huram, or Hiram as he's called in some places, the king of Tyre, responds and he says, yeah, your God is amazing. I know his name and I bless him. And Hiram of Tyre isn't condemned for speaking this name, which is too holy for a Gentile to speak. Instead, Scripture presents this as, look, even this Tyrian king recognized how great the God of Israel is.
Give God praise. Yeah, and
Amen.
That is amazing. So listen, let me just say this right now, Nehemia. If you don't hear me, just keep talking.
Yeah.
We've got an amazing editor.
No problem.
We have an amazing editor. We've got this set up so that our voices are coming through two different channels. So what he can do is, if I listen to the edits and I don't like what you're saying, I'll just have him cut me in. And,
no, wait, what? No, it must not happen.
No, it won't work that way. This is my last couple of weeks of doing this, so you can just talk as long as you want. If I don't like it,
wait. Okay.
Okay. So now can we go to? In fact, I like your homework for the people, because that you cannot. Boy, oh boy. Just reading the sections of Scripture regarding this, I just think paint an amazing picture. It says here the temple. And actually, I want to ask you, the temple that King Solomon built for Yehovah was 60 cubits long, 20 wide, and 30 high. That's what it says. So
you're going to drag us into the issue of the dimensions and talk about.
I actually did some research on this, and I don't want to drag us into the issue, but I was really surprised at how far people go to explain what this actually looks like, the exact dimensions of this, and then the exact dimensions of connecting that with the Mishkan, and what the.
Well, don't you know there's deep symbolism in these numbers? When it says 60, it actually has prophetic significance.
Yes. Okay. So listen. So I know you're going to go on. You're going to start beating your drum. But let me tell you something. It's a really fascinating study. Just to go in to ask what potentially now, without going beyond Scripture, though, without going beyond Scripture. These numbers that jump up. Now you know me, Nehemia, for as long as you've known me, I've been like a big numbers guy. I love the numbers. I'm just going to let everyone know I'm a numbers guy.
You're the numbers guy.
I love the numbers. Only because sometimes the numbers jump off the page and you don't have to do gymnastics with them. They just like, wow, 50 loops of the da-da-da-da-da and the arc and all that. But it's fair to say that this does give us what the actual dimensions were of this particular that which Solomon is building. And again, Mr. Archaeology guy, so when we hear about the second temple that was built, and I don't want us to go into great detail, but how big of a difference between that which Herod built and what Solomon built? Just off the top of your head, how big of a difference do you think it was?
Well, so the biggest the real answer is we don't actually know exactly how big his temple was. What we know is, what we could say for sure archaeologically is the Temple Mount platform was he doubled the size of it, we're told. So, and that was even the temple that Zerubbabel had built on the ruins of Solomon's temple. Herod came and doubled the entire enclosure. So what we see today that we call the Temple Mount, only half of that was actually the area of the Temple of Solomon, and technically it might be a quarter, because if he doubled the length and doubled the width, that makes it 4 times a larger area. So it might only be a quarter of the area that was the original Temple of Solomon.
No, Nehemia, again, I'm hoping that we don't get cut out, folks. So you're listening right now. I just have to throw this out. I can't let us off the hook because I'm not sure when we're going to talk about this again, other than I'll be bringing it up as we're in Israel. But there's been some discussion about people saying that the present Temple Mount, where the second temple was, where Herod built his temple, is not the place where the first temple was. I get notes from people about this all the time. I've been surprised. There have been people.
It's gaining in popularity. This theory.
So tell me what that. When you hear about that, tell me what your thought is. I mean, can I put you on the spot?
I was handed this. I was handed the book that started this all. Maybe about 10 years ago. Could it have been that long ago? By our mutual friend Bruce Brill, and he asked me, "Could you help me discern this?" And I read the book. Where it presented the theory that the original temple was not on the site of what we call the Temple Mount today, but it was actually on the site of the Gihon Spring, which is, I don't know, about a few hundred meters, or I don't know, it's nearby. It's like within visual sight of the Temple Mount, but it's not the exact spot.
Down the hill.
It's down the hill, and then part of their argument, or part of the argument of this guy who wrote the book 10 years ago, or when I read it, might have been 10 years ago. Part of his argument was that what we're seeing today and we're calling the Temple Mount, that wasn't built by Herod, it was built by the Roman 10th Legion when they occupied the ruins of Jerusalem. And my response to that, after looking at all the evidence, is shtuyot b'mitzah gvaniot, which in Hebrew translates as nonsense in tomato juice. It's
the word of the week, folks.
Shtuyot b'mitzah gvaniot, utter and complete nonsense.
People are
really
selling books in Nehemia. There are videos out about this.
Well, I mean, so recently, I think it was in Biblical Archaeology Review, and that's why it's getting all this popularity. But it really is, I'm not convinced.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad you said that, and we now have it on. We have it on tape that basically, it's recorded that the present the new flavor of the week, the new color of the month, regarding the Temple Mount not being there, the temple. Not being where we presently call the Temple Mount, is a convenient way to say, well, with all the chaos and confusion there, that isn't where it was anyway, so let's just don't worry about it. Let's move on and claim another spot, which is not unlike some other things that are sort of like that, where they kind of take that which was original and move it over somewhere else and say, now this is the spot. And we see that over and over and over again. By the way, people, if you haven't gotten a chance to come to Israel, be in Israel, there are opportunities for that. And Nehemia, I want to put you on the spot here, because one of the things that you do, and one of the things that you've done, you're presently not living in the land of Israel, but when you were living in the land of Israel, you would on a regular basis host people that would come into the land and take them on individual tours. Now, when you are in Israel,
I'm actually doing 2 of those this year.
Okay, and so tell us about that. I mean, tell us just about the significance of people being in the land. I mean, just physically being in those places and specifically focusing on the issue of what we're talking about right now, the Temple Mount, where Solomon built the temple, the first temple, the second temple. What for you? What is it like? Leading people and just give us a little taste of that.
For me, I lived in Israel for 20 years, and every day, really, even after even 18, 19 years into it, I'd walk around and I'm like, am I actually walking down the same street where David fought the Philistines? Like, this is unbelievable. It really is. It's incredible. I mean, this is what my ancestors dreamed about and sang songs about and prayed about for 2,000 years, returning to the land, and now we get to do it. And I think it's just such a blessing. I really feel like I'm there in the land, and I go to these places, and I feel this spirit, this the spirit of Yehovah, and in these places. And now, am I going to say that? Oh no, it has to be what we call the Temple Mount because I felt the spirit there and didn't feel it at the Gihon Spring. I'm not going to say that. That's ridiculous. That would be a very silly thing to say. But there definitely is. Geographically, there's no question in my mind that that the Temple Mount is the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
And not the Gihon Spring. The Gihon Spring is where Solomon was anointed. There's a lot of important things that happened there. When Scripture wants to say the Gihon Spring, it knows how to say Gihon Spring.
Isn't that true?
So, so it's not, geographically, it isn't it, but really being in the land is such a blessing. In fact, Keith, you're doing some kind of a tour, I know.
Yeah,
aren't
in
you,
fact,
with
it's
your
too late.
ministry?
It's too late now because as they're listening to this,
I'm sure you'll do another tour in years to come.
Yeah.
I actually met some people in Washington who said, "Oh, we're going on Keith's little tour." Those are their exact words.
Did they say those words? Because you're going to offend me.
They actually said Keith's little tour.
Okay.
I said, I'm going to tell Keith that.
Yeah, okay, well, folks, let me tell you this. And I'm not sure what's going to happen. This will be the third time we're going to be there. And actually, you and I are going to be in the land of Israel physically at the same time. We'll be having a tour of people, different parts of the country, even parts of the world that are coming in for that. You'll be there doing the Aviv search, which I am so a little frustrated that last year I was able to join the people that were on the Aviv search. The year before, I was able to join you at some portions of it, but now this year you're going to be there. I'm going to be there. We're going to have people on the BFA International Tour. You're going to be there looking for what time it is, and it's really interesting, Nehemia. This and you folks. I think we're going to have to wait until we get to Israel to bring this up. But around what's happening at that time of year is really amazing. I do think it's significant, Nehemia, that we're going to be there and the work that you're doing there to know what time it is. Can we wait? Let's wait a little bit to discuss that.
Sure.
When we're in the land of Israel, let's move on because I'm hoping we're plugging along here. It says here, this is one little sentence I want to bring up. In building the temple, verse 7 NIV, in building the temple, only blocks dressed at the quarry were used. The quarry. It's like it's a fact.
Now, what verse are you in? I'm so confused.
I'm in verse 7 of chapter 6.
Of what chapter?
Chapter 6.
Oh, so in chapter 6 it's the same. Wait, how'd you jump ahead to verse 7 of chapters? Okay, we got to talk about that verse.
Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead. Let's talk about it.
In building the temple, only blocks dressed at the...
Wait. I'm sorry. I can't let you do it.
You won't let me do it.
There's so many...
Okay.
No, I can't. Absolutely
all right.
not.
Well, you wanted
to
go...
How did you skip chapter 6, verse 1? Are you kidding me?
No.
You're the time guy.
What happened? You were talking about what was happening as far as the measurements of the temple. We were in verse 2. Then you were in Hebrew. So let's go back to 6:1 in Hebrew.
Let's do 6:1.
Yeah, we have to.
I'll read in Hebrew. And it came to pass, b'shmonim shana v'arbamot shana, in the 480th year of the going out of the children of Israel from the land of Egypt, in the 4th year, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month of Shlomo ruling over Israel, and he built the house of Yehovah, is what it says in 1 Kings 6:1. So that's fascinating. This is the first time in certainly the book of Kings where we have this reference to a date based on the going out of the children of Israel from the land of Egypt. And it's the 480th year. That's extremely important. Why is it extremely important? Let's do the math. So we don't know exactly when this took place, but let's say it was sometime around, it was in the 900s. We know that. So 900s plus 480 years means the children of Israel left Egypt sometime around 1450 BC. Read any history book and by history book I mean modern secular history, and they'll tell you, oh no, the children of Israel didn't even exist as a people until 1200 BC. And what's that based on? It's based on the chronology of the Egyptian kings established by Egyptologists who have a reference in around 1200 BC. That's the first written reference in Egyptian sources to Israel in around 1200 BC. And they seem to be described as a tribe there, although some archaeologists have come along and said actually that's not even Israel, it's Jezreel, the valley. It's some tribes that live in the Jezreel Valley. But then the bigger question is, how does Egyptian chronology correspond with our system of BC and CE, which obviously didn't exist back then, right? Meaning in 1200 BC, King whoever, Ramses or whoever he was, he didn't know that it was 1200 BC. He knew it was, year 3 of his reign. Exactly. So how do we correspond those two systems? And that's where things get really, really complicated. And my conclusion from all the years I studied archaeology and all the years since of reading about archaeology and everything is that the archaeologists, especially the Egyptologists, just don't have a useful system. I mean, they really don't know. They think they know, but their system is just so messed up. There's a lot of inaccuracies about that.
I want to say this. I actually had a couple folks. I call them the two witnesses that actually were looking ahead at some of this, and they challenged. They were giving a really good challenge on this actual verse regarding the 480th year, and how there are different people that use these particular dates and perspectives to come at it from a different level. I would just say one thing. In the Septuagint, it says the 440th year. I believe it is in the Septuagint. We talked about that before in Nehemia, where we're talking about the differences in the Septuagint, whether it's verses that are different or certainly translation. What happens? That's an example where you have the actual a date difference. But I think what kind of hits me is that there are people who've done in-depth study regarding this verse and figuring out the history, and there are some who use the same verse to argue why the biblical reckoning of time is just way off, because they can take this and connect it with something else. And again, that's not something that I've been able to dive into, but I think it's phenomenal, and I'm really glad, Nehemia, that you didn't let me mess this up. Because what was happening was we were talking about the verse numbers, and I was reading the verse number, and we went to the Chronicles area based on the actual dimensions of the temple. When we were talking about the dimensions of the temple, that's after this really key verse. So
your eye jumped to the next verse.
So my eye jumped to the next thing. But I will say
you were trying to hide it. No, I know you were trying to hide it.
Yeah. Anyway, let me just say this.
You know that this completely refutes your entire Methodist system.
Yeah,
the fact that this is 480 year destroys the Methodists. I know you're trying to hide it. It's a conspiracy.
Yeah. Well, you know what? There are a number of books, and I want to do this. Hopefully, during this time, we'll put up some resources that people can check, that kind of as a way to kind of balance us out, because again, we are pushed for time, and we don't know that the technology is going to continue. So that's what I was trying to get to.
Right.
Can we move on now? Can we go to verse 7?
So now we got no. What are you talking about? It mentions here the month of Ziv, which is the second month. So we have 3 month names that are mentioned in this in this story, and by story I mean this section of Kings, not this chapter, but this basic section, and they're all in the context of the interactions that Solomon has with King Hiram of Tyre. It mentions the month of Ziv, the month of Etanim, and the month of Bul, and we actually know of Bul from Canaanite writings. Hiram was a Canaanite from Tyre, and so people have said to me, Ziv, Etanim, and Bul, those are the real Hebrew names of these months, and the answer is absolutely not.
No one's ever said that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is what people teach. This is a big teaching out there. We don't remember. We don't know what the 4th month is really called, or the 5th month, but we know the 2nd month was originally Ziv. No, the 2nd month was originally called HaChodesh HaSheni, which means the 2nd month, and Ziv is what the Canaanites called it. Bul is what the Canaanites called one of the months. Etanim is what the Canaanites called one of those months. And this is why it says the month of Ziv, which is for the Israelites the 2nd month.
There it is.
Right. Now, why is it mentioning Ziv as a month name? Because this is in the 2 reasons, possibly. One is that it's out of respect for Hiram, who's mentioned in this chapter. Maybe his people will come and read this chapter as well. And number 2 is this may actually be based on sources that were Canaanite sources. In other words, when the prophet sat down to write all this information, did he personally witness that there were 10,000 people who went to cut the wood, or were there documents that were kept by these Canaanites, maybe the Canaanites stationed in Israel, and he had those documents, and he said, "Oh, okay, it says here it was the month of Ziv. Well, I know that's the second month," and so he he explains to us what the document means.
That's a great explanation.
That's probably the answer. All right, so that makes a lot of sense. Now let's look in verse 3, and I'll do this really quick because we are pressed for time. But we've got and I think we've mentioned this before, and this will be the word of the week. So we've got the three sections of the tabernacle. The outer one is called the courtyard, or in Hebrew Azarah. Mm-hmm. Then inside is the Kodesh, the holy section, and then Kodesh HaKodeshim, the holy of holies. Well, we have the same three sections, but with different names in the temple. It's the Ulam, Hechal, and Devir. Mm-hmm. The Ulam, I think they translate as porch, maybe. Hechal is the sanctuary, and Devir is the inner sanctuary. I don't know how they translate in English, but it's Ulam, Hechal, and Devir. And Devir is the inner sanctuary, and we mentioned, I think, in one of the previous episodes, that the word Devorah, which means bee, may be connected to this word Devir, which means the inner sanctuary, because bees live in a sanctuary, which we call a hive. And so maybe that's the inner sanctuary, related to the word Dvorah. It's not for sure, but it's possible. So that's my word of the week, the word Devir.
Tell us what it is.
Daled Bet Yud Resh.
Okay.
Daled Bet Yud Resh, from the root Daled Bet Resh.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
And of course, as we're dealing with that, like I said, we could go into great depth on the meaning not only of the word, but how it worked and what Solomon was doing. And again, hopefully we'll have some other sections that will be able to go even further into that.
All right, now we can talk about verse 7.
Okay, now verse 7. In building the temple, only blocks dressed at the quarry were used, and no hammer.
What?
No, that's what it says.
That's not what it says. No, it doesn't say that. I don't believe you. It says that in your NIV?
It says, and no hammer, chisel, or any other iron tool was heard at the temple site while it was being built. That's what it says.
Wow. So let's read the NRSV. It says, the house was built with stone finished at the quarry, so that neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron was heard in the temple while it was being built. So, wow. So yeah, there's really no issue here. I mean, it's just so clear that, interesting. Yeah, that's not even...
we're missing something.
I can't even believe it says that. Yes, so here we have in verse 7, it doesn't say, the word quarry doesn't even appear there. The word is masa, which actually means bird to carry. It's from the word nasa, to travel. Mm-hmm. And these are stones that were brought. That's the the significance of it, that these stones were brought from somewhere else. And so, and actually you could translate it possibly as, you could read it very differently. You could say in the temple, or the house, literally when it was being built, was built of complete stones that were carried, meaning they were complete stones that were the same they were the way they were cut out of the mountain, or the way they were found in the fields is the way that they were is the way that they were cut, is the way that they were used. And then it has this strange sentence. It says, and hammers and axes and any implement of iron was not heard in the house when it was being built. So that's actually a really interesting statement, and it brings us back to Exodus chapter 20, verse 25, which says, Exodus 20:25. It says, I'll read in the King James, if thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone, for if thou lift up thy tool upon it, thou hast polluted it. And it's interesting, it says their tool. In the New Revised Standard Version, it says if you use a chisel upon it, you profane it. Let's see the JPS. It says, for by wielding your tool upon them, you have profaned them. And the word they're translating tool and chisel and implement in all of those is the word cherev, which means sword. And that's the that reveals what the issue is here. That a chisel, any metal implement is viewed essentially as a form of a sword. It's a sharp metal object. And the point is, the altar of God is holy, and it should not be fashioned, it should not be chiseled out using a sword or something like a sword, a metal object. So how did he cut it without using metal? How is it possible that he cut it without using metal? So your translation solved the problem for us by telling us that he finished it at the quarry. So he did use metal. He just used metal at the quarry. And look, it's possible, even though that's not what it says in the verse, it's possible that that's actually what happened, meaning that's the point of saying that the no iron tool, like the JPS says, so that no hammer or axe or any iron tool was heard in the house while it was being built. In other words, it was heard at the quarry, but not at the temple. And again, the word quarry isn't in this verse in the Hebrew, but maybe they did, fashion these stones far enough away from the temple that it wasn't heard in the temple. Does that make sense? Are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay. So, but this then opens up the door for the rabbis to come along and spin an entire web of stories about this. Do you know the rabbinical stories about this passage?
No, I do not.
Okay.
I do not know those.
So there's almost an entire literature about this particular verse. Definitely an entire legend, constellation of legends. So, how did Solomon cut the stones? Well, every little Jewish boy growing up knows that Solomon cut the stones using the shamir. What is shamir? Shamir in later sources is described as a certain type of worm that would eat stone.
No way.
Yes, it was a worm that ate stone. In the early sources, it's not clear that it's a worm, but it is something very small that eats stone, and in fact will cut any sort of stone or glass or anything that it comes in contact with except for lead. And so it was contained within lead. There's actually one modern Jewish scholar who has suggested that it was some type of radioactive substance because it can be contained within lead. That's kind of ridiculous. I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous, I guess. But there's nothing in the sources that would indicate it was radioactive. But it was some kind of possibly a worm or something that we're told in one source was as thin as a human hair, and it would consume everything except for lead, and that he used this worm to cut the stones. And so he did cut them at the site of the temple. This is what the rabbis teach. But he did it using a worm, not stone, not metal implements. And actually this worm is really important in rabbinical literature. We're told that it was created. We're told the specific time in history when it was created in the writings of the rabbis. In Ethics of the Father, that's the Fathers, which is the opening section of the Mishnah, called in Hebrew Pirkei Avot, it actually mentions this shamir, this mythical worm, as being created on the sixth day going into Shabbat, meaning the sixth day late in the afternoon, just before Shabbat. It was one of a handful of things that was created. So it's actually really important in rabbinical literature, this idea of the shamir, this magical worm, this mythical worm. Now, where did they get the shamir from? So this actually appears in the Babylonian Talmud in the Tractate of Gittin 68a, and I want people to go look that up for yourselves. It talks about how Solomon didn't know where to get the shamir from. And so he had to, you're not going to believe this. Are you sitting down, Keith?
Yes, I'm with you.
So we're told that Solomon went to speak to Ashmedai, the prince of the demons, in order for the Ashmedai, the prince of the demons, to reveal to Solomon how he could get a hold of this shamir worm. And Ashmedai reveals to him that it was preserved. It was used by the hoopoe, which is a type of bird that lives in the mountains. It was used by the hoopoe in order to cut rocks, and that he could trick the hoopoe into turning over the worm and use that to then build the temple. This is in the Talmud, that Solomon's actually captured Ashmedai, the king of the demons, or prince of the demons, and manipulated him in order to get this information. And what do you have to say about that, Keith?
I'm so glad that we're just about at the end of this, one of the most difficult recordings. I think if you saw what I'm doing here while you're talking and waxing on about something,
we hear you're turning pages.
Source, no, you're source that I've never even read. To be honest with you, it doesn't move me.
Okay. Well, so when I hear about this, that the rabbis are tarnishing the name of Solomon, saying that he spoke with a demon and used this demonic power to then build the temple. I'm troubled by that, deeply troubled by it. It does make me think of Matthew chapter 9, verse 34, and then again Matthew 12:24, and then the parallels in the other Gospels. It says in 9:34, but the Pharisees said about Yeshua, it is by the prince of demons that he drives out demons. And then in 12:24 again of Matthew, but when the Pharisees heard it, they said, this man doth cast out demons, but does not cast out demons, but by Beelzebub, the prince of the demons. So you read that in the Gospels and you think, what? Why would they accuse Yeshua of harnessing the power of demons? But in their mind, it made perfect sense because they believed that Solomon had harnessed the power of the prince of the demons. Think about that.
Give us the source, Nehemia, from what you were talking about. The people have to see this source.
Okay, you've got to see it for yourselves. It's in absolutely. It's in the Babylonian Talmud, the Tractate of Gittin, 68a, and it goes into 68b. And it speaks there about how it's a whole long story, a long drawn-out account of Solomon sending Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, to capture Ashmedai, the king of the prince of the demons, and he brings him back as a prisoner, and he eventually reveals to him they translate it in the English as a woodpecker, but it's actually a hoopoe that has that has this special worm. Anyway, so here's another passage in the Talmud in Psachim 110a. And it says, Rabbi Joseph said, the demon Joseph told me that Ashmedai, king of the demons, is appointed over blah, 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 and it goes on. So what this means is, according to the Talmud, there were rabbis who spoke with demons and got information from demons. Now, I don't know if they actually did, but they claimed to be speaking to demons and get secret mystical information from the demons. They claim that Solomon got secret mystical information from the demons. And so now it makes sense why they would accuse Yeshua of being in league with demons, because they believe that they were in league with demons, according to their own sources. Now, here's a really interesting thing I came across during my preparation. I looked in the rabbinical commentaries on this verse to see what they said. So that was from the Talmud I just read you. The Talmud was completed around the year 500 A.D. There's a rabbi in the 13th century named Radak, or Rabbi David Kimchi, and he writes in his commentary on 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 7 about this whole story about the shamir, this magical worm that's supposed to cut stone. And then he says he doesn't mention the demons though. He says he says this was transmitted through tradition by the sages from the days of Moses our rabbi, and it must not be doubted. Wow. Are you with me, Keith? So he's saying, how do we know about this mythical? He doesn't call it mythical. How do we know about this holy worm that can cut stone? Because our rabbis knew this from the time of Moses. Because Moses too used the worm to incise the stones on the ephod. That's what they say. And so, how do the rabbis know this is? Because it sounds ridiculous. There was a worm that ate stone. He says you can't doubt it because this was transmitted through tradition by the rabbis from the days of Moses. Now, how? According to the earlier rabbinical source, it didn't go to Moses. Go back to Moses. It went back to Ashmedai, the prince of the demons. So, which one is it? The early rabbis attributed this secret knowledge to something being revealed by demons. The later rabbis say it was, they claim it goes back to a Mosaic tradition or a law. And now I'm gonna end with this. So did they know about it from the oral law revealed to Moses or from Ashmedai, the prince of the demons? Maybe the oral law comes from the demons, not from Moses.
Well, I'll tell you, folks, what happened. As Nehemia was going on and on about this, these sources, whatever, I was cut off. I didn't hear.
Thank God.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm now going to suggest, and this has just moved to the number one most frustrating recording we have done, even ahead of the one where we cut off 8 times. So I am at the place now where we're almost at the end of this section. And so, Nehemia, I'm going to ask people, if you have anything else you'd like to say, go. I'm going to hold my frustration.
Time warp.
So I will say this: people could actually listen to. No, I'm in a time warp, and it's interesting when you're talking about that.
I think Keith has fallen into a singularity.
You're talking something about a worm and rabbinic sources. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm saying is, this is the number one frustrating recording. So I would like to give this over to you. Is there anything else you'd like to say about this section?
You just missed the number one prophet pearl of the whole section, but whatever. Okay. No, it's good. God stopped you from speaking so the people could hear me.
Amen. And he's going to stop me again.
All right. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
All right. Let's just end with the last couple verses. It says in verse, and this is my 11 through 13 in chapter 6. I think it's the same for you. And we have this statement here. It says in verse 12, this house or this temple which you are building, if you will walk in my statutes and my judgments, you will do, and you will keep my commandments to walk in them, I will establish or raise up, literally, my word with you that I spoke to David your father. And I will dwell in the midst of the children of Israel, and I will not leave my people Israel. So there we have this promise. If we keep the commandments, God will be with us. It doesn't say the negative what happens, but we know that from other places. And I think I'm just going to end the program myself because it sounds like Keith isn't there.
Isn't that what our...
Oh, there you are.
Oh, no, I'm here. Nehemia, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm still here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, and he's gone. Well, the good news is we have one more program that we have to do before we get to Israel, and that's the portion of Tetzaveh, which is we'll do at some point. All right, let's just end it. Can we end it with prayer?
Please go ahead and pray for us, Nehemia.
Okay. Yehovah Avinu Shebashamayim, Yehovah our Father in heaven, I come before Yehovah and I ask that you put your blessing upon this program, that you give us the ability to come together and speak about your word, and maybe the challenges that we're facing, maybe this is a picture of what we need to do, because we can be sitting on opposite sides of the world speaking over Skype, but the common ground is it's just not there. And if we're sitting in the same place and we have the physical common ground, then that becomes then a picture of the common ground that we can focus on, looking for your truth in your word. And Yehovah, I ask that you give us this opportunity, that you bless us in a way that we can come together and everything will work out. I pray that we can continue to share your word and study your word and dive down into the depths of the ocean and pull out those prophet pearls and share them with people. And Yehovah, it's really been a blessing for me to be able to go through these portions with Keith, and I've learned so much more from just going over the portions and being forced to dialogue about them, and in a way that is constructive and honors you. And Yehovah, I pray that in the spirit of Solomon building this temple and speaking to Hiram of Tyre, that we can speak to the world and let them know that you are great, that you are the greatest God, that there is none as great as you, and that we shouldn't be embarrassed to proclaim that even to a Canaanite like Hiram, that we can proclaim this to all the world, that Yehovah, Atahu ha-Elohim, Yehovah, you are Elohim, you are the one true God, En Od, there is no other. And Yehovah, I ask that all of our knowledge comes from you and not from demons or people who claim to be getting their information from demons, but only from your word and only from you, and that we all come before you in truth. May this be your will, Yehovah. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for listening to Prophet Pearls with Nehemia Gordon and Keith Johnson. For more information, please visit nehemiaswall.com and bfainternational.com.